All right, so we've been talking about the genotype and the phenotype. The genotype being the allele combination and the phenotype being the physical expression of that allele combination. So with genotype, we said a heterozygous individual has a dominant and a recessive allele. When we use that term dominant, it's not referring to the fact that it is the most prevalent allele in a population, right? So when you hear the word dominant, I don't want you to think it's dominating the population, because that's not true. All right, so it doesn't mean, as it says, that a dominant allele is more common within a population. So we have here the example of polydactyly. Polydactyly refers to having more than 5 fingers or more than 5 toes. And therefore, most of us have 5 fingers and 5 toes. And we have the genotype of being homozygous recessive. So it's saying 399 out of 400 people are homozygous recessive because we're not polydactyl, whereas 1 out of every 400 people are polydactyl. So even though it's controlled by a dominant allele, it is not dominating the population, if that makes sense. Okay, so polydactyly is controlled by a dominant allele, but very few people show that dominant allele. 1 out of 400 people has the dominant allele, whereas there are far more people who have the recessive allele. So that's the point of this slide, is just to simply say, all right, dominance does not mean it dominates the population. So let's go back to Mendel and his garden peas. Okay, we can look at the combination of alleles from each parent and think about each parent going through the process of meiosis to make gametes, right? To make an egg cell or sperm cell. And this is true even though we're talking about plants. They produce egg cells and sperm cells. So each parent will pass on one of their alleles in each of the gametes that are produced. And we can predict what the offspring will look like from 2 parents based upon their allele combinations, right? Because this is what they're passing on to the next generation. So this is what we call a Punnett square. So we would place the allele from one parent across the top, and they could be given an individual the same allele if they are homozygous, or they could be given them, each gamete could receive a different allele if they are heterozygous. So we place the alleles from one parent across the top and the alleles from the other parent down the side. And then you say, well, what would happen if this gamete was fertilized by this one? What would be the allele combination, right? This gamete carries this allele, this gamete carries this one. We combine them together, and it would produce this individual, this genotype, and therefore this particular phenotype. Then what if this individual was fertilized by this one? And then you would fill in the block there what their allele combination would be. Same thing, you would go take this one, go down, and go across and fill in the block with the allele combinations. So let's do a little practice session on this one. So it says if a white pea flower is crossed with a homozygous dominant pea flower, will there be any white flowers produced from this cross? So a white pea flower is crossed with a homozygous dominant pea flower. All right, so if we are, let's see if I can move in an example here of a Punnett square. Okay. All right, so let's see about, let's see if I can move into position here, a Punnett square. All right, so we're going to make capital P is for purple alleles. All right, since purple was dominant in our previous example, we're going to use a capital P for purple. and we're going to use a lowercase p to represent our white allele. You're not going to be expected to know which is dominant and which is recessive. That information will always be given to you in the example or in the problem. All right, so we're asking, will there be white flowers in the offspring? So we have one parent who is homozygous dominant, so two big P's. So we're going to place that one parent across the top of our square because they will always pass on the dominant allele. Then we have a white flowered parent, so they must have two recessive alleles in order to be white, right? They can't have a dominant allele or they would be purple. So the only way to be white is to have a genotype where they have two recessive alleles, and that would be homozygous recessive. So then we say, what happens if we cross this individual? So I'm going to write their letter down in that block, the capital P, and I'm going to bring over the lowercase p. So if this sperm cell, let's say, fertilizes this egg cell, this is the allele combination we would get. If this sperm cell fertilizes this egg cell, this is the combination we would get. All right, so I'm simply just bringing down the capital P for the dominant allele and bringing over the lowercase p. Bringing down the capital P and bringing over the lowercase p. Okay, so it asks, will we have any white flowers? Do we have any white flowers? Well, what's the phenotype of this individual? They have the dominant allele, so they will be purple. All of them are heterozygous, right? Two different alleles, dominant recessive, dominant recessive, dominant recessive, and dominant recessive. They're all heterozygous and they have the dominant allele. Therefore, they will not have a white flower. They will all be purple. Sorry about that. I didn't think it was going to disappear when I clicked that button. All right, so let's move on to our next question. All right, so it asks, a white pea plant is mated with a purple pea plant. All the offspring from this cross are purple. So a white pea plant is mated with a purple pea plant. All the offspring from this cross are purple. What is the genotype of the purple pea plant parents? It's like a tongue twister there to say all that. So let's bring our Punnett Square back. All right, so we have a white flowered parent, so we're going to use the lowercase p again. And we don't know about the other parent, we just know that they are purple, so they have to have a capital P. But we want all of the offspring to be purple. So we know that this is always going to be passed on, the recessive allele, so we can kind of put that in every block, right? Then every block. Now, what's going to make all of them purple? Well, if they all receive a purple allele, right? Because this is our white allele, the lowercase p, and we would bring this one over, so that makes two of these purple. But what about down here? We know our parent is purple, so we know they have one allele, but what would be the other allele of that purple parent? So in order to make these last two be purple in color, we need a dominant allele. So we'll put our capital P there, another capital P, and that will give us all purple offspring there. Okay, so our other parent has to be homozygous dominant, and that would answer our question there, that the purple flowered parent, what is the genotype of the purple pea plant parent? They would be homozygous dominant. All right, one last question. Let's try out. It says, what parental genotypes would be chosen to ensure that all pea plants produced from a cross would be heterozygous for flower color? Okay, so if all, right, what parent genotype, so we need to produce our parents, could be produced from a cross, that would be heterozygous. So it's kind of like what we were just drawing, right? If you were paying attention, we had heterozygous individuals, right? So we said all of these have to be heterozygous. So the way to do that, right, is we could look and say we have to have capital P from one parent, lowercase p from another parent, right, to get that genotype. Capital P, lowercase p, right? Lowercase from there, and we would have to have a capital P here. Lowercase from there, and we get a capital P here. So kind of working backwards from our offspring to our parents, we see that the parents would have to be homozygous recessive or white, or homozygous dominant for purple flower color. And that answers our question there. So I'll have other practice questions for you to work on. So there's a wide variety of different ways to kind of ask these questions and to fill in your Punnett squares. So the more practice you do, the better off you're going to get at these types of questions.